welcome to Taking Care of Business, the JLA podcast. I'm Neil Hershen, your host. Today, we are diving into the realities, pressures, and opportunities shaping social housing today. JLA has supported housing associations for over 45 years, helping providers navigate the evolving demands of compliance, resident expectations, and asset management. On today's podcast, we are joined by two of JLA's experts in housing, Aaron Butler and Helen Buchan. Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Aaron, the Director of Housing for JLA Group. Been with JLA for 7 years nearly now. Been specifically working within the housing sector for the last 6 years. Started off as a business development manager and then moved into the director role of housing, basically shaping and directing the sector. We like to pride ourselves on being sector experts. So everybody within the housing sector at JLA, they only deal in the housing sector, which I feel gives us that kind of opportunity to really understand our customers, the sector, the regulation change, and everything that we need to know to best be able to support our customers.
Helen.
I mean, what an intro to follow, Aaron. So I'm Helen Buchan. I am the head of product at JLA. So I look after the actual physical products, but I also look after how we package those products up in terms of the services. So total care, service contracts, those kind of things. The R&D and technical team, they report into me as well. So we spend a lot of time working with all our customers and understanding what their wants and needs are, and then making sure that we've got the products that can support all our customers' needs.
Thank you, Helen. So we're also joined by James Barr from Hyde Housing. So that's to give us a housing association's perspective. James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Neil. Good to see you all, and thank you for the invitation to come and join the podcast today. So it's very exciting to be here with you. I'm James Barr. I'm an operations manager at the Hyde Group. I've been working in the social housing sector for 23 years now.
Wow.
And the last 15 of those have been at Hyde. So throughout that time, I've had a number of experiences across a range of different service areas. My current area, and for the last about 6 to 7 years, has been in the later living service. So I oversee the team at Hyde that deliver the intensive management services to our later living schemes. So commonly known as sheltered housing, older persons housing. We have strong connections with our supported housing team, and we work together to achieve a lot in those later living schemes. And my connection to JLA is where we have the group laundry contract. So we've been working with JLA for a number of years. They deliver not only our washers, dryers, and dishwashers and all of the services around that, but also JLA do some work for us in terms of the canopy cleans, the TR19 kitchen ventilation cleans, as well as ensuring that all of the compliance of our dryers is done periodically. So we have quite regular contact between myself and Aaron as the contract managers for that service.
All right, then. Well, so let's talk about tenant safety first. Given all of the experience that we've got in the room today, what would you say are some of the most significant changes that you're seeing in how residents and housing associations view compliance in recent years?
I think I'd like to go first with this, and this is purely from a supplier's perspective. I think from a sector and regulatory perspective, the housing sector is probably the most regulated sector in the UK, or at least one of. And I think that there's been a number of changes within housing over the last probably 3 to 5 years that have kind of shaped what it now looks like from a resident's perspective. And I think it's mainly driven through the Decent Home Standards, tenant satisfaction measures, AWAB's law, which actually really pulls together a much higher level of compliance moving forward. Areas where housing associations now are being scrutinised to certain degrees, closely monitored from one perspective, but also expected to provide a really high level of service for residents that are ultimately paying for rental within their housing association. And I think that when you look at it from a supplier's perspective, there's also an element of pressure on us as suppliers to make sure that we get it right as well. Because ultimately, that pressure then comes down to the customer, which ultimately is our client. But we like to see our customers as not only the housing association but the resident as well. And so I think that, when you look at the decent home standards and the expectations through tenant satisfaction measures now, when something goes wrong at site, it's quite quickly escalated in order to make sure that that is repaired and maintained. So from our perspective as laundry suppliers to Hyde Group in particular, if a machine goes down now, that machine can cause much bigger impacts from a regulation perspective when it comes to residents being able to raise complaints to the Ombudsman, having level 1, level 2, level 3, becoming more serious from a customer perspective with it being Hyde and how that then impacts them. So we as suppliers definitely feel an impact there of the regulatory change, because the pressures to get it right are much higher than they have been in the past. We always want to try and get it right as suppliers, but now we feel that pressure from the customer as well.
The level of coverage in the press as well, that's really heightened it, and it's certainly made residents more aware of what their rights are, and which is nothing. It's a good thing, but it's also presented challenges both from our perspective and probably from yours, James, as well as the housing association itself.
It has indeed. I mean, our commitment to offer safe, affordable, high quality homes is critical. We see a lot in the press about the importance of fire safety and compliance, and it's what we do day in, day out at Hyde. We invest significantly to ensure our buildings are safe and compliant. We do numerous inspections in-house and through our supply chain as well, to make sure that everything we do within our homes, in the communal areas, and indeed within residents' homes, gives them the optimum chance of living safe, sustainable lives that they can feel a huge sense of comfort and assurance within their tenancies. And we talk a lot about communal areas. I think there's a lot of inspections that go into communal areas to make sure fire safety systems are working correctly. There's lots of fire panel testing. Every week we test the fire panels, and of course we need to make sure that's all done with the best value for money. So where possible, the emphasis is on us to ensure we can deliver that in-house. So routine fire panel, water testing, water flushing to test, for Legionella, etc. Where possible, we do that in-house, and that helps to keep costs down.
Yeah.
And we've also seen
your own fire wardens on site.
We have staff on site, so there's not necessarily wardens on site, but we have clear signage and strategies for each individual block. But for me, I think one of the big changes is going into residents' homes, because I think you can put everything in place to keep the common parts safe and compliant. But going into residents' homes, it can feel quite intrusive. We do person-centred fire risk assessments at Hyde. So throughout our later living schemes, in our supported housing schemes and our high-rise builds, every year we go in and do a person-centred fire risk assessment. And this is really to help prevent a fire ever occurring. So if we can mitigate those risks early on, it helps to keep everyone safe, not just that individual, but the whole community. And so, going in, it can feel a little intrusive, but it's all about building that trust and relationship with our residents. And by having that regular site presence, it builds the rapport and the understanding that we're there to support and to help keep everyone safe. And we're looking for things like, unsafe cooking. About half of fires in the UK are a result of cooking accidents.
Yeah.
So we're checking, is the kitchen safe and compliant? We're looking for hoarding. We're looking for unsafe electricals. Is there evidence of smoking? Candles, of course, can be a huge hazard.
Big one,
I've seen incidences of fires where individuals have been burning candles next to shower curtains or next to window curtains, And so there's all these risks that we're working with our residents on to try and mitigate. So if we can prevent a fire happening in the first instance, that's our best starting point. And then we've got all these safety measures in place wrapped around the resident's home, like alarms, detection systems, 24-hour monitoring systems to alarm receiving centres, that if something were to go wrong, everything is in place to mitigate and minimise the impact. And we found these to be incredibly successful, because we're not just looking to minimise the probability of a fire occurring, but we're also looking at the individual, because it's person-centred. We're saying, how could this resident respond in the event of a fire? And again, it's quite a personal conversation. Obviously working in later living, we see residents who have changes, perhaps with dementia. They could leave cooking on. Yeah. So it's about, are they getting the support they need in their homes to live safe, independent lives in their homes? And would they be able to self-evacuate? So our relationship with other stakeholders is critical here. Working closely with the fire service, for instance, give you quite an extreme example, but we do have them. Those residents who may be bedbound, and if they're smoking in bed, that compounds the risk. And so those residents wouldn't be able to self-evacuate, and they don't always have 24-hour carers on site. So it's about working with the fire service and making sure that we can put that mitigation in place to minimise the fire occurring, but also to keep them safe and make sure the fire service have all the required information they need should a fire occur within a building.
You think with the I suppose the tenant satisfaction measures and the residents now, like you were saying earlier, Helen, being so kind of aware of the expectations now, when you're going into a resident's property, do they feel reassured by that? Do you get a lot of pushback, or is residents now probably more aware about fire safety than ever before due to Grenfell Tower? Yeah. And the press and the media in general? You would imagine that within a housing association and a large block of flats, there'd be some reasonable pushback trying to get into properties and just make sure that residents are safe and we're mitigating where we can. Do you feel it's quite a positive for residents to see you kind of on the ground going into properties and having a quick look around to try and mitigate the
It's a really good question, Aaron, because when we first started this, we expected there to be quite a lot of resistance. To have a landlord representative go into your home, actually doing an inspection, looking around, not just in the kitchen, but potentially in the bedroom, looking for signs of unsafe smoking, the candles, as I referenced earlier. And so there are instances where residents have been reluctant to let us in, but that's often where the risks are. Yeah. So if they refuse to answer the door, if they're disengaged, often they're the highest risk. And so for us, the key here has been building the trust and the relationship. And by having staff regularly on site, showing that they're there on the same side as our residents to help keep them safe, that has essentially built the trust to enable us to go in and complete the risk assessments and to help put mitigation in place.
It's reasonably labour intensive, isn't it, as well? So do you think that, given the fact that Hyde are probably one of the biggest housing associations in the UK, does it help to have that type of labour force available to carry out those types of inspections? If you imagine how many individual properties Hyde are managing in total, it'd be thousands of individual properties, which is a huge labour intensive task, really. Do you think it helps with the size of Hyde being able to manage that? Because I know smaller housing associations might struggle slightly.
Yeah, certainly it helps. We've got the scale, but we prioritise where we go in. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the later living, the supported and the high-rise buildings because they're the ones at greatest risk. We know from the fire safety and specialised housing and the work of the National Fire Chiefs Council that fires can disproportionately occur for residents living in later living. And that's why we target later living, supported living, and of course the high-rise buildings where the risks are greater. So any resident can have a person-centred fire risk assessment. They could even be living in a house because there's still a risk, particularly if they're unable to self-evacuate if something were to happen. So it's available for all of our residents to benefit from. And we gather key information that's anonymously shared with the fire service, and it's put in a premises information box. So if a fire were to break out, the information is there, so the fire service would know which flats to go to, where there needs to be evacuation assistance required.
Just going back to tenant satisfaction measures is something that we talk about all the time in JLA, more because we look after commercial laundry rooms, and if you imagine in a in your own property at home, if your dryer washer packs in, it's a huge problem. It's a considerable issue for you.
Yeah, it's time consuming.
Yeah, and then
costly.
you compound that in a communal laundry space, because you've got not just 1, 2, 3, 4 residents. You've often got 20, 30 residents all sharing these community laundry spaces. And so we are really aware of that impact on the customer, and the customer being the resident, via tenant satisfaction measures, because ultimately if the machines aren't working, the resident's going to be hugely impacted by that, which reflects poorly on us as an organisation and as well as the customer. Do you think that I suppose this is driven more of an obligation from housing associations, Hyde in particular, to get it right from a supplier's perspective, not just laundry, but heating, fire safety? What's the impact? What has Hyde felt from the impact of tenant satisfaction measures? Have you seen a growth, a spike in residents kind of calling up the help desk and referring back to decent home standards and really pressuring groups to take action?
Yeah, I mean, we've been very proactive, and I think it comes down to the contract management. As we know, if anything goes wrong, we're quickly on the phone to put a resolution in place. And you correctly pointed out that if a laundry machine or a dryer goes down, particularly if there's only one for an entire site, it may only be 3, 4, 5 residents, but that washer or dryer can be imperative, particularly if there's incontinence present. They need that continuity of service. And Hyde are responsible in our residents' eyes. Our customers deserve that response from us as the landlord. And so they come to us, and obviously if there's challenges, if it's going to be a few days, or if there's complex additional parts required that are not readily available, we have that conversation to fast track it and to find a resolution. So I think in the background, residents can see that we've got a network of suppliers who work around us to support us, and your specialist organisations, and we work closely. And this is why partnerships are so important for us. By having good working relationships with our supply chain, we can deliver efficient, high quality and value for money services for our residents. And so, as you correctly say, Aaron, the complaints typically come to us, but we're reliant on a speedy response from our supply chain. And this is why we work to build it into contracts to make sure we're getting a fast and efficient, responsive service. And I think that's been one of the successes of our working relationship, and of course the new contract which we've recently procured together. So I think, yes, Hyde are very much in the residents' view that we are the ones where things go right, we get the credit, and that's reflected in the tenant satisfaction measure surveys. But we're reliant on so many organisations and supply chain partners supporting us to boost those tenant satisfaction measure surveys. And indeed, you mentioned about non-compliance. When things go wrong, it's important that we can embrace that feedback. It's essentially free consultancy. That's residents telling us where things haven't been to their satisfaction. And
it's the same for us, actually, from your perspective, feeding back to us. That's how we improve. That's how we create better services and better products. So it's exactly the same for us.
No, we've made some. We're working on a project at the minute for visibly impaired residents, trying to find a solution.
Yeah.
And I think we're always trying to listen and learn and react more than anything to the change in the market as a whole. I think an area that I'd like to touch on and just understand is the impact on compliance through IoT, the Internet of Things, technology itself, the fact that the world is changing from a digitalization perspective. And I think that suppliers don't always get it right. Some suppliers try to get it right and move with digital. I think it's a challenge because we've got an elderly population as well, which might not quite understand the new digital world. But I think it really links into compliance as a whole, because if you can use digital to your benefit as a business, it helps you manage your compliance. You see it in the FM world through systems and processes that capture compliance and provides it in a centralized place. And I think we've discussed it before, haven't we, off camera, in regards to JLA's remote technology.
Yeah.
And the way that plays a part in identifying faults early to provide those quick repairs before even the residents and the customer is aware that there's a problem. I suppose I'd like to get your view on technology and how you see it changing the landscape in housing and how that links into compliance.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question again, Aaron, because technology and digitization is critical. You know, we have to utilize everything that's out there, and we need the innovation to keep delivering a better service for our customers. You touched upon the point of the auto reporting. And again, this is something we love. It's worked really well where it's been introduced. The JLA Connect, I believe it's branded as.
Yeah.
And, you know, historically, you know, a machine would develop a fault. It would rely on somebody to phone it through, whether that be a resident, a family member, a carer, a member of our staff on site. Although they wouldn't necessarily know, you know, they'd see a machine unless somebody informs them there's a problem with that machine. So you can lose some valuable time there. So, you know, we have encouraged residents and their carers and family members to phone reports through, you know, by putting the direct number through to JLA on the appliances. But, you know, it's not ideal, you know, and I think the game changer has been the Connect technology. So before that fault results in a breakdown, and that sends the alert through to JLA, and you send an engineer, and it sounds great, but the examples we've seen have been fantastic. So I've had some of my housing scheme officers say to me, James, you know, JLA engineer turned up today. All the washers and dryers seem to be working absolutely fine, but they got a report to say something wasn't performing to its optimal level, and it was at risk of breaking down. So before the breakdown occurred, the engineer attended, replaced that part, and it gave that seamless laundry function. And I think that's a great example of using technology for the service area that JLA provide to minimise the downtime, to ensure that there's that quality service and a continuity of service for the laundry appliances. And it's worked really, really well.
We've already talked about scale, and with Hyde being, you know, one of the largest housing associations in the country, it's part of the G15. So you obviously understand that whole operation at scale. When housing providers then like merge, grow, how does that scale ultimately translate then into better outcomes for residents?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I mean, it's about those economies of scales and working together. We've spoken earlier about working with our supply chains and our partners, but it's also about working with the sector. There's a lot of smaller organisations out there, housing providers, who are under, you know, a lot of financial pressure, but they've got really strong values, missions and values, you know, to do good things. And many of those are aligned to what we do at Hyde. And so, you know, recently at Hyde, we've grown a lot. You know, we've had we welcomed Tower Hamlets Community Housing on board with us. We're currently going through a consultation with RHAG Housing, who are a London-based provider. And there's a lot of parallels. You know, our mission and values are so firmly aligned that by working together as a single organisation, we can get better value for money. We can share best practice together. There's a lot of very good things smaller housing providers we can learn from as well. So it's very much a two-way learning process. Of course, it gives the smaller providers access to more specialised services. So where we've got services such as tenancy, antisocial behaviour, building safety, later living, supported housing, as just a few examples, it gives those smaller housing providers access to those specialist services. Mm-hmm. And we're always looking at how we can ensure the best value for money. So, if we can have a single group contract with a large number of assets, we're getting the price down, and ultimately those economies of scale benefit our customers. And I think it's been quite difficult for some of the smaller housing providers to do that. And that's why we're seeing more mergers and acquisitions happening within the sector. Hyde are very active in looking at organisations that are the right fit for our mission and values. And we admire a lot of the work that they do. And so it's very much working in partnership. And I think RHAG's a really good example of, subject to the consultation, what residents of customers of RHAG have to say about the proposals. We would welcome them on board as a subsidiary at Hyde. And that gives us additional growth. We can look to build more homes, deliver high quality services, and build an organisation that has a big community impact. And we're already operating in those areas. So, we are looking at organisations where we're already operating, we're delivering services in those areas.
James, while we were preparing for today, I was on the Hyde website and I was reading through your page on the value of a social tenancy. So can we maybe talk a little bit about how you see social value shaping the sector today?
Yeah, absolutely. Social value and the value of a social tenancy, it's really important topic. And I think it's twofold, because the value of a social tenancy can be quantified. And we've done a lot of work at Hyde to look at the difference it makes and really putting some numbers behind that. And as you correctly say, Neil, there's information on our website that really breaks it down into some numbers. So living in a social housing tenancy is more than just having a home and a set of keys. It's about a community, and it's about that long-term assurance of having a safe, secure home for whether it be an individual or a family. And we build those communities and make sure they're safe and affordable, great places to live, really. If we look at the model of if there was no social housing and those people, some of our most vulnerable customers were still in temporary accommodation, or even having to sofa surf with family or friends, and not having that assurance of life opportunities that you get with a social tenancy, the costs are really quite significant. We look at the 4.3 social homes with 4.3 million social homes within the UK, and the boost it gives to the economy amounts to billions. For instance, by having that assurance of a long-term tenancy and the services you get with social housing, it boosts your opportunity of being in long-term work, which of course, helps to relieve pressure from local authorities and state benefits. It helps to relieve pressure from the health services. So we see that the NHS has less demand when people have a safe and healthy home to go back to every day. It helps to relieve pressure from services such as the police. There's lower rates of crime as victims and perpetrators. So by having a social housing tenancy, it's so much more than a home. It's an opportunity for us as a landlord to enrich our customers' life experiences within their home and within their community. Social value is something we speak about very passionately at Hyde, because again, it's working with our supply chain partners to put resources back into our communities. So in line with the Procurement Act, we ensure that every new contract has a measure for social value input. And so our new contract with JLA has social value included in that. And that's about giving back to the community where it's needed most. And we have platforms such as Match My Project, which is a website we use to advertise opportunities, and our partners are able to go on and match to those opportunities that are out there. So it's very much done in a structured way, and it's giving back to the communities. Not always, Hyde residents. It can be the broader communities, perhaps where Hyde children go to school, for instance. So there is a direct impact on our residents, whether that's those that pay the rent or those that are part of their wider families. So it's a real community impact we see through social value.
Just to bring that to life a little bit, so Match My Project, so I would say JLA, we're on Match My Project. And I think when it started, which was possibly, James, keep me honest here, it was either 18 months or 2 years ago. And one of the projects that required funding in one of the local areas was a local community group needed some help with marketing support. So our marketing director and one of my other marketing colleagues, it was just 10 hours a week that they asked for, and they helped them set up their own little website. So that's just a really good example of the little projects that are on there that really impact and help and support the communities. So
I think
big fan of it.
Helen, you will advocate for this from my perspective.
Yeah.
I feel like within JLA, I probably mentioned social value more
We talk about it all the time,
than anything else. And I think I've personally seen a huge shift in drive from a supply chain perspective in getting social value within contracts. I actually feel quite passionate about it. I was brought up on a council estate, 5 children. We didn't have huge, sums of money or anything like that. And, there is an element of children that, and adults as well, that can be left behind within communities. And it's interesting to hear that now, more so now than ever before, there is a link between social value, I suppose, and economic outputs in the environment. If you provide a safe, affordable home, the economic environment surrounding that home, it has a positive outcome. And I think that's probably why I feel quite passionate about it myself, because I can see the value. And I think even when you look at the way our contracts are, are costed from a supplier perspective, often, not always the case, but often the case, these contracts are service charged back to the residents. So ultimately, the residents are paying for these contracts, especially within the commercial laundry space. And so for us as suppliers, we do have a duty of care to give back to the environments and to the societies that we work with. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's something that we should be aspiring to do. I think it's something that we should be driving from the front and setting an example as an organisation. I think as well, especially as being the larger, laundry supplier in the UK, we should be on the forefront with social value. And I think we put a lot of thought into it, particularly with the Hyde contract and other contracts. We've had the whole housing team out gardening, sleeves rolled up, laying beds for a housing association for quite a rundown little communal garden space. But I think even within that contract, like the impact that had on the residents and what they saw, from a JLA supply perspective, was really positive. So I don't see it as a negative. I do think that there needs to be a real balanced approach to the what is possible. From a supply chain perspective, we often see bids and tenders when we're working on new contracts or contract negotiations, re-signing contracts. When the social value piece comes up, some of it can be quite difficult from a supply perspective. There could be some quite unique asks within that tender. And I think from a customer perspective, as a housing association, I think there needs to be a real look on and balance to see whether some of the requests are possible for suppliers, or can it be factored in a different way to make sure that social value piece doesn't affect the overall tender submission.
I think that's where Match My Project comes in really well, though, because it's giving us
You can
it's
pick what
helping
you
us.
need,
Yeah,
what
it's
you're
really
having to
specific
do,
as
yeah.
well, because I think certainly from a supplier perspective, you can have your own views in terms of what social value means, but particularly in a sector like the housing sector, it's more about what you guys need. And so platforms such as that really, really help us then. And one of the things I hate to see, and hopefully the procurement tax will stop this now, but greenwashing, you know, people saying, I'm going to plant a tree. Well, great, but how is that actually directly benefiting
the resident.
Yeah, and the communities in which we serve and which you work in. So
The Procurement Act, you know, links in quite nicely with social value. We know that in a lot of criteria within the quality submission, you know, you need to score 5 to 10% on social value, and so, you know, it's almost forcing the supply chain to take action and to build a social value strategy within their organization to ensure that they're not only giving back to the community, but also just from a business perspective, there has to be a commercial approach. They ultimately want to win that contract as well. And I think that's where it works really nicely. Look, you want to win a contract, great. Well, we're the housing association. You're going to bid on our contract, which is ultimately paid for by the resident. So what are you going to give back to the environment that you service? And I think if you look at it like that, it's a fair question, you know, especially with service charged contracts where residents are ultimately paying it. And I think I hope it gains ground where that's concerned. I hope that more suppliers do create strategies around it to give back to the communities that they serve. And I think that potentially that, you know, from a governmental policy perspective, that's the way that we should be looking at this as a full community giving back where you can, where it's commercially viable to the environment that you serve. And I think if you do that, you will ultimately get better economic, social impact throughout the supply chain.
And it does make a big difference as
I think
well.
it does,
you know,
yeah.
we see the difference it makes throughout our communities. You correctly point out, Aaron, that, you know, it's quite a significant proportion of the percentage scoring on the tender opportunities. It's 10% at Hyde. So if there's not a good social value offer, that company is unlikely to be successful in their bid for a contract with Hyde. So, you know, 10% is a significant score. Even if there's good pricing and quality put forward, social value is 10%. My team in later living benefit hugely. I mean, ultimately, it's our customers who benefit. You know, here we are in January. It was only last month we were able to celebrate Christmas, enable residents to come together as a community. Doesn't cost a huge amount, but it's an opportunity to put on refreshments, decorations, you know, refresh the lounge, make sure it feels seasonal. And again, some of the successes we've seen in the later living schemes in recent years have been national celebrations. One of the last being when we had the King's coronation. Our later living residents loved that opportunity to come together. Obviously, there were some street parties. We were able to celebrate within our schemes. And that meant a lot to our communities. And by having access to platforms such as Match My Project and the social value that's being put forward by our supply chain, it really makes a difference. I've also spoken about tackling social isolation. Again, you know, our digital projects, we know that a lot of our later living residents are some of our least digital enabled residents. And so we provide digital devices. We've already provided free communal Wi-Fi. And on top of that, we're providing the digital training. So we're giving residents every opportunity to get online and enjoy being online and to do it safely. And by providing the training and, you know, secure devices, we're enabling them to go online safely with that training and really benefit from the opportunities out there. And a few years ago, that wasn't possible. You know, we look back at what happened during COVID. We were in the early stages of our digitization of schemes then. So not every Hyde scheme had free communal Wi-Fi. If we were forced into lockdown now or in the future, it would give residents that assurance that their scheme is digitized. Many residents can access that free Wi-Fi within their homes, but we've certainly got it in the communal areas, such as the communal lounge. So it really benefits the schemes, and also by having a platform such as Match My Project, we're able to track it, to quantify it, and to really celebrate the value it brings to our customers and the wider community.
We're going to wrap the session up. So with that in mind, if you were to each give one key takeaway or one final thought that you'd like to leave the audience with, what would it be? Aaron, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I think probably my key takeaways would be social value and the change in regulation whilst working in the housing sector, working alongside our customers and partners. I think anyone wanting to work in housing, work with housing associations, need to be acutely aware of social value and the impacts that they can have as suppliers in the environments that they serve.
James?
I think my main takeaway from today is around technology and digitization. We spoke earlier about being proactive in the repair service, and to provide that seamless service to our customers, to utilize technology and digitization through, for example, the JLA Connect, to repair something before it breaks down can make a huge difference. We've been real advocates of that. It's worked really well where we've helped to run that pilot. And it's something that we're really looking to have fitted to all of our JLA appliances in the coming months, because I feel it really makes a difference and it creates that seamless service for our customers.
Helen?
Couple of key takeaways from me. So just continuing on James's theme in terms of Connect and the whole digital experience. So, we really need to make sure that My JLA and JLA Connect is really relevant to our customers, specifically in the housing sector, so that it's giving you guys what you need. And I expect that to develop and evolve over the next couple of years, which is super exciting.
We'll close it off there then. So firstly, I just want to thank all of you for joining us. So Aaron, Helen and James coming over from Hyde. All of the websites and resources that we've talked about today, they'll be on the screen or they'll be in the description below. But you can find more information on matchmyproject.org. You can find the white paper that Helen referenced there through the tenant's lens on the JLA website. You can also access our JLA Knowledge Hub if you go to the website, which is www.jla.com. So let's just call it there then. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us.